Hello there, and welcome to my spoiler-filled thoughts on the 4th episode of the Halo series. And starting off, I feel like this is easily the weakest episode of the show so far. I will start with Master Chief's plotline this time, since that was the slower of the two. The story picks up where episode 3 left off, with Dr. Halsey and Master Chief on their way to Chief's home planet to investigate his parents' house. Once Master Chief reaches his childhood home, he begins digging holes in the backyard to try and figure out what his father made him bury when he was a child. Unfortunately, the reveal of what was buried was rather disappointing, as it was only a box containing Master Chief's old drawings from when he was a child. Master Chief then spends the rest of the episode wandering around his destroyed house, trying to remember any clue about where the Forerunner artifact could be. However, while he's trying to remember where the artifact is, he also remembers that Dr. Halsey visited him as a child while his parents were still alive, making him question how he was recruited into the UNSC to begin with, seeing as Halsey claimed that she only met him while he was at the orphanage. The series seems to keep building up this reveal, which I don't think is going to be that big of a payoff, since I will be spoiling what I think is going to be revealed. If you're unfamiliar with what I'm talking about, then you can skip to the timecode down below. Basically, Master Chief is going to remember that him as well as the other Spartans were abducted from their home as children. And I don't really see this plotline being interesting, the way this show has been going so far. That's what they're going to do, isn't it? Oh, I really hope I'm wrong about where I think this plotline's going to go, but I'll get to that at the end of the video. First, let's get to what this video has been about. Continuing to wander around his house, Master Chief finally remembers that there was a cave close to his house, and the episode ends with Master Chief descending into the cave along with Halsey, and them discovering the larger Forerunner artifact. Honestly, this felt like a waste of an episode for the Master Chief, since I don't think anyone really cares about his past or his family that much. What I think more people would be interested in is seeing Master Chief fight off the Covenant, but this episode has made it so that Master Chief has spent more time wandering around his parents' old home than he has actually fighting the Covenant in this series. And we are already 4 hours into the series by this point. This honestly isn't what I think anyone would have expected from a Halo TV series. Another thing that I've noticed about this show is the way Cortana is handled. She acts more like a smart home assistant than an actual character. Honestly, I think you could replace Cortana with like an Amazon Alexa and there wouldn't be much of a difference. In fact, this Cortana acts more like Windows 10 Cortana than Halo Cortana. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if I found out that the creative team was inspired by smart home assistants when they were writing Cortana, rather than actually looking at what the character's like in the games. I'm hoping that Cortana begins to develop some character soon, but we shall see. Now moving over to Kwan's story. This one was slightly more interesting, but really highlights the flaws of the way that the Insurrectionist plotline has been handled so far. Kwan and Soren finally reach Madrigal and head to the capital city. However, they need to keep a low profile since Vishner's men are looking for her. Now, my main issue with this is that, as an audience, we haven't really been introduced to any other members of the Resistance. Every other member we've seen was killed in the Covenant attack in the first episode, so this episode basically feels like Kwan wandering around the streets and picking out random extras and claiming that they're part of the rebellion. She starts off by recognizing a boy in the markets who wants nothing to do with her since she is now wanted by the leading authority in the city. However, he tells her to come to her father's funeral that night if she wants to find her father's generals. However, when she attends the funeral, there yet again are no recognizable characters for the audience to know, so it seems like she once again just picks a random extra out of the crowd who happens to be her father's last remaining general. It is here that we learn that all of the other generals have been killed off by Vishner, and the rest of the rebellion has given up and accepted UNSC rule due to fear of the Covenant. At this point, Soren is ready to give up on helping Kwan. However, Kwan has one last person she wishes to contact, being her aunt, who controls all of the money for the rebellion. But once again, her aunt is just another character we've never seen before, just there for exposition purposes. Kwan's aunt reveals that all of the money was used up by her father, and that her father wasn't as great as Kwan believed he was. But again, this only further highlights the issue that Kwan never really interacted with her father on screen. Again, the only time they ever talked was when she was running away from the Covenant and trying to warn him that aliens were coming. That is the one time this series that they ever talked. So it's really hard to gauge how Kwan really felt about her father, especially since the first episode she was talking about how much she wanted to leave the planet. And suddenly she believes her father was this great man and she wishes to continue on his legacy and lead the rebellion. They really should have spent more time establishing who the rebels were, instead of just quickly introducing the rebels before killing them all off. Kwan's aunt also reveals that her father really only started the rebellion after he visited some prophets in the middle of the desert, and they revealed something to him that completely changed his outlook on everything. However, this is left extremely vague so that we can spend the entire next episode having Kwan and Soren look for these prophets in the desert. After Kwan's aunt finishes telling Kwan what she needs to know, Vishnu's men finally find Kwan and kill her aunt before Soren shows up and rescues Kwan. Since Soren's ship was stripped for parts by the locals, he has no choice now but to join Kwan on her search for the prophets in the desert to find out the truth behind her father, who she never really interacted with. Why does this show expect us to care about this plotline so much? I don't know. So yeah, overall this really just felt like a filler episode. Master Chief spends the entire time digging around his parents' old house to find the larger artifact, and Kwan discovers that her father is not the man she thought he was, and needs to go out into the desert to find the truth. And to top that all off, the Covenant were not present at all this entire episode. Here's hoping that the next episode will finally start to pick up, since that will put us past the halfway mark for this series. Now, if you're interested in knowing what I think is going to happen in the next 2 episodes based off of what has happened so far, feel free to stick around. However, if you wanted to avoid the spoiler earlier, then you may not want to hear what I think is going to happen. So basically, what I think is going to happen is that once Chief finds this larger artifact, it's going to reveal the location of Halo. However, it's also going to further unlock his memories, and he's going to learn the truth behind what happened to him as a child. I believe this larger artifact is going to somehow unlock the memories that he was abducted as a child by Dr. Halsey and forced into the Spartan program, along with all the other children who would grow up to become Spartans. Now I think in the original canon, Master Chief didn't really care that he was abducted as a child, and he sort of viewed it more as a necessary evil, since he was the only thing preventing the Covenant from wiping out all sentient life in the universe. And so he sort of accepts this sacrifice of his childhood, knowing that he saved all of humanity. However, the way this show has been going, I think the direction they're going to take this is that as soon as he figures out that he was abducted as a child, I think he's going to go AWOL once again, and he'll feel confident that the UNSC will be able to use Halo to defeat the Covenant without him. I think once he leaves the UNSC, he's going to search for Soren and admit that Soren was right to leave the UNSC. However, reaching Soren's home, he will learn from Soren's wife that Soren and Kwan went back to Madrigal so that Kwan could join the rebellion. However, she'll also mention to Chief that she hasn't had contact with Soren in many days and she fears the worst. This will lead Chief to return to Madrigal in search of Kwan and Soren. However, back on Madrigal, I believe what's going to happen is that the Covenant are going to show up, since Maki is on her way there. And what I expect to happen is that they will attack the capital city of Madrigal, and Maki will capture Vishnu. Vishnu, being the coward that he is, will beg for her to spare his life, and she will offer to do so long as he tells her the location of the artifact she is after. Vishnu, not knowing the location of the artifact, will plead for his life and claim that he doesn't know where it is. However, I believe he will tell Maki that if the UNSC really does have her artifact, then they will no doubt be keeping it on the planet Reach, the home world of the UNSC in the Spartan program. Maki will be satisfied with this answer, and immediately depart along with the Covenant to begin the invasion of Reach. Somehow I figure that Kwan and Soren will figure out that Vishnu told the Covenant about Reach, and as soon as Master Chief shows up, they'll ask what he's doing there before Soren and Kwan tell him that the Covenant are on their way to Reach. And this will ultimately lead Chief to go back to the UNSC. And hopefully after that, we can get into the Fall of Reach arc, where I think that Silver Team will sort of play as both replacements for not only Blue Team as they have up until now, but also Noble Team. At least that's the direction I believe this series is headed in. While I hope this isn't the case, it's just a bad feeling I have that this is what will happen. But only time will tell if I'm right. Well, that about wraps up my thoughts on the current state of the Halo series. Let me know in the comments what you think of the series so far, or if you've even been watching it, and consider subscribing if you're interested in knowing the rest of my thoughts on the series as it comes out. And until next time, thanks for watching.